Media is something that is evolving every year, whether it's videos, movies, games, or discussion. Due to technology, innovation, and the internet, even if there's negatives behind it, there's also positives in front of it. That everything in our lives has pros and cons. Without technology, we would be living something that is vanilla, that has no flavor in it. Without innovation, companies would still be at zero, and we will always be stuck, instead of going up or down. And the internet is one of the important parts of our lives for companies, individuals, and groups. That most of us who create videos or internationally put movies and games on the internet. These three pillars will be one of the reasons why the Ukrainian studio was born. And it was called 4A. That it was started to GSC. GSC was founded in 1995. That in 2001, they released an RTS game for Windows called Cossacks European Wars. It was the first that piqued the company and its finance from 2001. And in 2003, THQ became their publisher. That they're working on an RPG adventure game called Stalker, Shadow of Chernobyl. And while it's quite... yeah, it was famous due to mods and its depth of gameplay that was credited since FPS games that are RPG are rare. That while it was a cult hit, there were issues to the company pre-production. That Andrei Prov and few Stalker developers decided to make a company that is called 4A, that with their ambition will be the reason why the Metro brand was created, not just fame, but also a love to create a franchise. 2006 was the start of pre-production for 4A, but without direction, or what kind of an atmospheric game. They know they're gonna make a new IP for an atmospheric game, since they're experienced on creating Stalker, but they don't have ideas for a new universe. So they decided to ask the novelist of the Metro 2033. That person is... Dmitry Potrenko! No, Dmitry Gluzovsky. Dmitry Gluzovsky made a novel in 2002 when he was 18 years old. That is free from the internet website, and any readers who are curious are able to read the novel for free. The reason behind why the novel was created is because he was inspired by the chaos of 1990s Russia and has been in the metro often since he was 10. When he started his novel, the Russians saw his novel, that it became a success for the Metro 2033 novel, that 4A caught their interest and asked the novelist for a blueprint for the novel, and the novelist accepted, since he's been finding a publisher ever since when he finished his novel. So 4A and THQ found a story to make, and now it's 4A's talents to show how they can make a living, breathing world. Metro 2033 had a lot of development to the design doc. Thanks to Dmitry, he gave 4A the creative freedom, as long as they feature Artyom Meaning of Life and The Dark One, that the development ideas was skyrocketed, were all their ideas and potential dreams, which is gonna be a 20-hour non-linear campaign, a open world where you find tunnels until you reach the polis as Artyom, a minigame of rat tunnels, train tracks, or more, a side mission where it's optional to go in there, and one that caught my interest the most is factions. Remember when there's 4 factions in this game? The Rhine, Komis, Spartans, and the Hansa. The design doc adds so many factions that I don't even know how many factions there are. Needless to say, most of their potential ideas were scrapped, where instead of a 20-hour non-linear campaign, became a 7 to 8 hour linear campaign, with the exception of the few levels I'll discuss later. And the RPG items in this game were scrapped, and side missions, or minigames weren't a thing. The only minigames are the sequences that change its gameplay effectively, and instead of an RPG survival adventure game, it became an adventure survival game instead. I'm not kidding. The design doc pointed out they were making a Metro RPG game, that this made me realize what the interface is like this from Metro. There's so many things that 4A scrapped to its design doc that I recommend you to check it out. And this is just scratching the surface from the Metro. That the most of the things I listed that were scrapped were revision in the sequels from their younger Metro brothers. And while the developers have so many potential ideas and their commitment, behind the scenes were something of a nightmare for 4A. The people who left the company from GSC in order to make an engine that is called 4A engine now. But when looking at its pre-alpha, there's one word that I would use: Stalker? Yeah, I thought so too. That the CEO of GSC accused 4A for stealing the engine, evident by the ex-members of GSC programmers, were just the same sound, textures, same command. 4A denied these accusations, but in the early life of 2006, when looking at its pre-alpha, 4A uses the X-ray engine, but they had time to heavily modify the engine so that when seeing its launch trailer, it's now different to Stalker. These accusations have no ending to it, it just left us a cliffhanger. All of these accusations didn't damage the game, but only hurt time on 4A that were accused and had to deal with it instantly. Metro 2033 in the original was something that I remember heavily, because my cousin has the copy of the game. I remember I booted it up on the PC and was excited about this Metro game, but first impressions mattered the most, and this game didn't impress me at first. In fact, I hated it before. While the people in the Metro are really intriguing and do a decent job on setting the universe, it made me stop after I met Chapter 2, The Bridge, when I keep following the NPC with no build-up, which is one of my main issues with Metro 2033, where you keep following NPCs no matter speed. You can moonwalk these NPCs, you can take a pee real quick while Khan is killing the Nosalis, or wait for Miller to open these switches, and you won't suffer any consequences. Where this game is at 7 to 8 hours at large, it feels like a 6-hour campaign, but after my frustrations with this game, I remember myself needing to try again, just like I did in Dark Souls 1, and I love this game. When I was in the Dead City section, where this is Metro 2033 peak, but the issues are still here. And what frustrates me the most about Metro 2033 is just its pacing and long time of following, because when you remove these unnecessary following and the game takes your hand off and go off for your own, it's so satisfying to see the atmosphere, where you don't know how to defeat these demons or getting swarmed by watchers, or desperately finding hidden areas where Stalker might set traps. These were my highlights for Metro 2033. Going outside that while it has low textures and models, but its lighting and attention to detail to the game is one of the most beautiful games I ever played, even if it's a 2010 game. You can have low textures in games, but as long as you have good lighting, it will make those up for it, and Metro 2033 makes that a great example of it. That the fact that I didn't mind its looks, because when going outside, you can feel that skill and sometimes desperately fighting the Nazi Rangers, while scavenging and looting everything and stealthily prepare to ambush the outposts on your own, using your resources. It's something where each level that 4A made they improve. Although I cannot play this game on hardcore, there's a reason behind it. Due to its clunky gameplay, bullet sponge enemies, Metro 2033 Hardcore is much harder than Metro Last Light Hardcore Ranger. While in Metro 2033 Hardcore for the Watchers, Librarians, and Nosalis, they're balanced, but the humans on the other hand can be difficult in a positive or a negative way, because enemies can survive a headshot, they're aware where you're spotted, and they're pinpoint precise that in fact you don't know where you're getting shot from. And stealth on the other hand in Metro 2033 is quite horrible in design, due to your character that is quite clunky when traversing, and they play like CSGO Faceit level 10 that is quite stupid or painfully superior than you, which can be threatening due to their numbers, that one member can take you down, but it's also a positive because take for example Sekiro, it's more about killing enemies one by one quietly and fight the rest as least numbers as possible. That is Metro 2033, and traps in Metro 2033 are quite often, that all it takes is one glass screw up, and the enemies will find a way to take you down and be alerted to future firefights, or getting spotted by lights that encourage yourself to be hidden. I love this, because lights can be a double-edged sword for fighting in the dark, or using your night vision, but your vision is limited, and while I love them, there's the level design. In fact, half of them aren't fair, where T6 has that suicide bombers that keep spawning while you escort with Miller slowly. It's boring, tedious, and annoying. Or a kid that carry on your back is a great pacing in my opinion, because it changed how you proceed, but the issue is that the sensitivity that people thought their mouse is broken. And last one is the third sequence. I don't have issues with the third sequence in general, but if its controls are horrible where instead of using your mouse for left and right, they use the A and D instead, which can be confusing for people because we're born to do predictable third sequences. Although there's some parts where I think it's my favorite. The librarian forces you to stay slow and look them in the eye. It's quite unique. the dead city, or any other place you go outside due to its scale and beautiness. In D6 where there's old men and other characters joke around, and sometimes it's fun not to take it seriously, while the rangers are dying one by one. But aside from the gameplay experience, this game is really immersive, and this is what 4A wanted for their game, where instead of an objective marker, you can use the map instead to see if you're in the right track, or checking your watch if you have enough gas mask to prepare from the surface. There's a lot of aspects in this game that is quite immersive, especially when playing Ranger Hardcore, that your HUD is limited, and you use your watch to see your inventory. The thing I also love about the metro is their stations. There's people who still have that losing hope, but still do their systems about what food we eat, how we operate in this cramped area, what we do in the metro. These things are explainable in their presentation by showing rather than telling, because we're in the experience when we explore, and it feels like a journey when you finish the game. It's because it's all connected together, and when seeing its design doc, I believe 4A is also inspired by Half-Life 2 and PCs, but intentionally or not, took notes from Half-Life 2 level design, that this is one of the games that never stops immersing the player, even though I already have complaints about the game repetitive locations, but the looks of the game helps a lot and use that as an advantage on the themes. Fidelity is one of those things I argue that doesn't do anything except only having that illusion on the graphics, but 4A's bleak engine made that atmosphere unique, and that's what made people appreciate its themes. And the different types of weapons like the bastard gun and the real gun is different to their function. That military grade rounds counts as currency that can be used if done right. That money is also a gameplay feature, not buying stuff, but also killing people, which fits to the story on what Dimitri made in Metro 2033, that us humans, even if there's no more resources or advancements to our species, will still find a way to invent weapons to kill each other, while not fixing the surface above us. That this is quite evident when going to Polis, because of soldiers using advanced technology, where Polis is a great place to live, that it makes Artyom home a village, and Polis a city, where people love to live due to its scale and liveliness. Although I love its visuals, as going to Khan, just to see people shadow, like a ghost. Khan is great at story aspects, but when he's in gameplay, he's the worst offender on following people. Voice acting in English and sound design on the other hand can be funny.
The boss? But of course! Then to the boss it is! Where else would you like to go, huh?
Okay, that's enough! Or else we'll have to drag him!
Move it! We'll finish this later.
The only way to fix the voice acting on RTM exclusively is to use Russian. Russian is one of those things where 4A spent in their translations, and I wish this was default instead of English, because the English of RTM is very bad in my opinion, because how he has no emotions of all the characters.
A wise man once said, "He who leads a war for the love of his fellow man will defeat his enemies." I led my war protecting my family and friends, protecting my home, the metro.
But at the same time, it can make Artyom as a civilian that is desperately doing Hunter's goals as a young man who struggles, rather than being a young man who's an experienced soldier.
Остановить хотя бы одну войну. Тогда я не смог бы точно объяснить, почему я пощадил черных. Но понял. Мои кошмары, в которых я видел черных, были их попыткой связать.
But these actors should not be blamed due to bad direction, and I simply recommend people to translate this game to Russian if you want to see the characters' emotions. In terms of the story, it's quite decent at its best. 4A and Dimitri was able to have that creative freedom and is able to accept on rewriting plots if possible and assist the authors in this game. But the thing where I question myself is the game mystery, because while it can be intriguing, the Khan's mysteries of the tunnels, the Dark Ones, and the Librarians, it mostly bombards me a lot of subplots in this game, that it can be a good thing for setting the mystery for sequels, just like Halo Combat Evolved story. And they did. But the mysteries in this game are a lot, and throw at your face. The Dark One is a great example that lacks this. Why are we, the protagonists, are able to communicate to the Dark Ones? Or how are we able to see the Dark Ones? The game lacks it, but it can be a great mystery for a sequel. But the thing is, there's no explanation of us, why, or even Artyom taking personally about the Dark One on why they exist. You just simply left to a mystery to the game. and when discovering that the Dark One is also the villain, Hunter told you to seek out Miller, while Hunter is going out and be gone forever, except we see his flashbacks to fight back, rather than communicating with them, until you find an ending where unique the species, and there's another conclusion to this, where you can save the species by having karma points, and shoot the designator down. And how do you get these karma points? Well, exploring around, giving poor people money, and it's quite funny to play a guitar to save a species, but it makes Artyom humanized to be honest. But there's two endings that has a message for this, where first is we understand the Dark One's motivation, that they want peace with humans, and second is us the species is having to kill everything but not understanding their motives and why, unless it's pure evil. But the Dark One is the opposite. This made me realize after I read the novel that I wish the game explained the message better, although there's one dialogue that explains this message when Artyom gets fated.
Страшная вещь, да? Но на самом деле она не злее, ну, скажем, огня. Все зависит от твоего взгляда. Всегда старайся лучше разобраться в ситуации, прежде чем делать выводы. Теперь пойдем. Тут небезопасно.
Aside on everything what I negatively said, this game is one of the games I finally appreciate, 4A with their development and commitment, and us people, we have to start somewhere, and it proves the sequel on what 4A is delivering. But despite on that first try, they managed to make a fan base on 2010 due to the novel, or how the game on people's mind are really good for a middle market title. But the thing is, I just wish Metro 2033 could have been better, but following NPCs that are minor and fixable, explaining about the Dark One in our minds, polished levels, and the worst part is the game crashing. These are rare, but still noticeable, that while may be mixed for me, I can see why Metro 2033 was created, because of 4A's vision and their commitment. Even if their design doc was scrapped, most of them for 2033, THQ still gave a green light for a sequel to Last Light that will make the people of 2033 something to be excited about. Fortunately, the people who work for Metro 2033 took those criticisms and promised us it's gonna be better than 2033. That 4A had a great development due to criticisms, knowing what's wrong with the bugs, smooth development, and THQ already accept for another sequel. That most of 4A already has that passion to its second game for a multiplayer shooter, co-op game, PS3 port for the Metro 2033, and Last Light's enough attention and support with stunning graphics, levels, game that plays better than 2033, a story with the quality of what a AAA studio should be with its presentation. That 2011 and 2012, THQ revealed so many things about the sequel a year or two later, when 2033 had launched with the teaser, film, and the demo of the game, a lot of short films of Metro Last Light. On the other side, 4A wanted a direct sequel for 2033, since 2034 is different with the same timeline, that Dimitri is working on a story that is not related to 2034, instead did 4A's wish. With all that said, most of these on paper should be great and smooth development, although not at first. After researching and watching documentary videos, I came to appreciate Metro Last Light even more when they have 2 years and 6 months, while they struggle with their studio, THQ, and technical issues. 4A had a huge disadvantage unlike companies like Infinity Ward or DICE due to publishers that have huge support and good conditions, with high-end PC, quality desk and chairs. While THQ promised us that Metro would be supported heavily, they were having bankruptcy with bad decisions. Jason Rubin, co-creator of Naughty Dog, assisted THQ, revealing 4A studios, cramped tables, chairs, low-end PCs, and electricity issues. When he visited Ukraine, while THQ is struggling, it revealed by 4A Studio that Jason Rubin wants to change 4A's disadvantage, so that means they have to bring dev kits, new tables, chairs, generators, and so much more to make 4A's cramped place, like in the Metro, a relief to the surface. with space and better working conditions. You think these are easy, but it's not. Needing new chairs and tables needs more space in the studio, and since the studio was revealed to be cramped, like in the Metro, it's impossible that they gave up, and the dev kids needed a must that they have to fly to the States and sneak it back to the Ukraine, that their only option was to pack a truck in Poland and try to find an expediter to help bribe its way down to Kiev, also requiring electricity and heat, which Ukraine has issues with that 4A is struggling to meet deadlines on weekends due to needing generators and keeping their hands cold. Also the transition to a different publisher called Deep Silver. With this in mind, they also have to scrap a lot of things to meet the requirements of Metro Last Light. And what are those? The Wii U getting scrapped for Last Light due to technical limitations for the CPU, Metro 2033 port for the PS3 due to business decisions. They were forced to do multiplayer, although while 4A loved that idea to do multiplayer shooter, they decided to scrap it to focus more on the single player, and the co-op was removed for the same reason. With this also, Dean Sharp, the CEO of 4A, also had to move on our apartment due to dangerous-looking Georgian man, and his 3 entourage greeted him after he finished his long day job of office. Jason also made this article to appreciate 4A as like the underdog who has used their creativity with less resources, unlike other AAA companies that have better condition and resources. That he referenced 4A like Peely from football. He was perhaps the greatest football player of all time. He learned to play using barefoot because he couldn't afford to buy shoes, he received no scholarship offers out of high school, was undrafted, and played sparingly before he hit deadlines. Just like underdogs who have received these challenges like Cloud9 winning the Boston Major in CSGO against the Superstar Squad FaZe, who have far more experience and skill against Cloud9 with young talent members from America. While these are interesting stories, for a perspective said quote, "We deserve the rating we get. After all, the consumers and critics only care about the final product, no matter the conditions are." Metro Last Light was the first Metro game I had ever played from the franchise. When playing its first level again, Sparta, its introduction about the Dark One, and the prologue always have that chill to your spine, to its presentation and sequences. When waking up, I always thought I'm going to have a great time playing this game. And I did. When visiting the Metro of Nazis, Reds, Hansa, and Artyom's journey, the only issue about Metro 2033 is about its jank, and that makes it frustrating for people who prefer to have that smooth journey. And that has been addressed here. Movement hasn't been this perfect, and gunplay that improved. This isn't a game where it reminds me of its clunkiness on Metro 2033. It reminded me of playing games that I still have memories of. When playing its combat, it's more forgiving, and great for those people who are new to the franchise. Human encounters are more accessible, and being able to pursue them is easier, with throwing knives, suppressor, and how you engage it. When knowingly making a mistake won't alarm the entire army, and the game that has its graphics beautiful became much prettier after you boot the game up. And when meeting Artyom's duo, Pavel, he became the fan favorite of the Metro community due to his personality with the Three Musketeers squad, and he served for the story. More about that one later. Last Night was one of the games that I completely finished playing a lot of times due to how its characters and fidelity are breathtaking, what a AAA presentation should look like. After all, I still remember the story of Artyom's journey, and it's something I remember really well. But after finishing Metro 2033 and understanding the veterans of the series, I now know the reason why some dislike the combat. While playing the game is quite accessible for different modes and feels really good to play, it feels less like a horror game and more like an action game. First, the reason why the human encounters are scary in Metro 2033 is because of their savage reactions, insane detection, and how they can survive a lot of shots when you're the underdog who cannot take a lot of shots unless you use the medkit or patiently regenerate your health. Last Night on the other hand is much easier with guards that are distracted, unable to spot you from afar, even if they're in your face, an indicator where you can get spotted or not, and guards that have the slowest reaction time I ever play in any video games. Even has a fuse box to make stealth easier. no traps to alert the entire section of guards, reloads and actions are faster. To be fair, this game in the Redux version has two modes, Survival and Spartan. Survival is returning the roots of what makes 2033 Artyom slow, and Spartan is about a rollercoaster of gunfire, explosions that makes Artyom fast, while also having that option of hit markers. The issue I have with Metro 2033 is its stiff movements, and that's what makes it frustrating to do stealth. Last Light addressed this, although creates a new problem of guards having slow reaction time or no awareness. Ranger Hardcore doesn't address this. You think Metro 2033 if you hit a throwing knife it won't kill a guard? That can be frustrating, but sells that you're in a survival horror game. Last Light is making guards that are stupid and reminds you of other games that can be clumsy. That doesn't create tension. I think this is a middle ground for newcomers and veterans that it can be a double-edged sword. Last Light guards can still take you down if you don't strategize or use your medkits. But with all that said, Metro Last Light still intimidate you with the shrimps, Nosalis, Watchers, Spiders, and Demons. The best thing about Metro is monsters that are distinct and memorable. They're more bloody, but make the game ruthless, and unforgettable moments that can make the player scared, which is also why it's a shame making this game a stealth combat action game instead of a survival horror and conserving your resources of what Metro is known for. And difficulty wise, I recommend people to play this game on Ranger Hardcore on Survival for veterans of the series. While guards still have no awareness, it makes monsters and guards more of a threat that can make your actions have consequences and scary to engage. On the newcomers, I believe normal and hardcore can do its job with Spartan, making enemies fair while also having that great pacing of an action game. Speaking of the difficulty itself, the level design is such a huge improvement. Most of the levels of Last Light are memorable and have that polished levels with great sequences and moments. The reason why I said it's most is because in Sparta, while its introduction got me hooked with rangers that talk, Ashes and Pavel might not give someone the best first impression. This has been an issue for Metro 2033, and it's sad that they didn't address this. From not having that horror in action, Metro 2033 makes the player fall asleep and not do simple tasks, and even if they do, sometimes they block your progress and waste your time. That Last Light repeats 2033's issues from its first act, and making a repeat on what makes Metro such a fantastic game, because going out the surface has been improved by monsters that damp as horror and don't know how to defeat them with demons, shrimps, and watchers, and going to its clustered tunnels that has these side sectors that while you can ignore them, I advise you to go there, that can sacrifice your aim but isn't decreasing your speed. Watchers that can also spook you in some parts and get a good ending, or journals that can be read from the diary, that the ending also is a journey like 2033 when visiting everything deeply from factions, tunnels, surface, friends, and neutral stations, that everything was improved through its looks because of 4A's beautiful engine. This game is 9 years old, and yet there's some parts that can still be jaw-dropping, since we visit a variety of locations while making the game presentation authentic, like a theater where we watch variety of talents, a cramped area that we can listen to conversations, kids being taught what animals were in the old world. Just like 2033, we are in the experience that is enhanced and improved with 4A's engine. It's also the reason why I appreciate its maturity. Artyom's role is something that I still remember today because of villains, goals, and his actions, that the writers should be given credit on how well we can relate to him. While we kill every Germans, Russians, visiting the wasteland, and talking to characters, we still have a motivation to redeem ourselves and find forgiveness while understanding the world when listening to conversations, that in fact he's a character that makes a mistake that cannot be changed, where he finds a way to fix that mistake and face the past instead of running away to hurt others. That while he's a silent protagonist in game, he has these thoughts, feelings on his journey, and notes that you collected throughout the levels, with good voice acting on English that makes him a great relatable protagonist, not a vessel for the player. Because when he's the vessel for the player, it doesn't mix well, that you're only making a great character that has no personality.
Just a year ago, I stood on top of the TV tower and saw missiles rain on the botanical gardens, turning the flesh into ashes, smelting metal and glass. Nobody and nothing could survive that inferno. Yet Khan did find a Dark One there. Now my mission is to find and eliminate it. To finish what I started.
Artyom in the novel has a lot of personality, charismatic, and quite talkable, especially when voice acting dubs. English has been improved with great translations and what Artyom could have been in 2033, especially other characters on NPCs. My only complaint is some voice actors sound the same. Lenitsky is a great example of sounding the same.
Of course. Nothing ever happens in D6. Makes you wonder why we have to stand guard.
Nobody knows! Lesnitsky was at the lab. When the next shift came, the door was open and the lab ransacked. Lesnitsky was gone.
That can be confusing because of the direction, but the actors in English do a fantastic job of giving the emotions that also address 2033's issues and contributes to the story. Artyom has a strong goal on the Dark Ones that continues, where the little Dark One in the second act, the train, trying to observe your memory while being near to the train door if things didn't work out, where he remembers you after he revealed the past on you meeting and spoke to the Dark One, that in the present it's the opposite. While people think this is cheap, I disagree. This really blends well because Artyom, who was a kid, now serves the same purpose after the Dark One saved him from the Watchers, that it makes the character bond with each other. While having to see his idioticness on cities and others, but being a child it's quite understandable. You can see him having that wave on the guards, or mindlessly annoyed from the decontaminations, or learning and remembering by your actions, whether by killing or forgiveness. After all, we're here to make the child of the Dark One forgive us and see how we change after those days, giving us a thought that people can learn from their mistakes and change quickly by their actions. That Pavel contributes his role. Pavel is one of those rare villains that I appreciated because he isn't heartless. He has his own thoughts and morals, just like Artyom, because you can see him being a true comrade to Artyom after you and him work together to escape from the Nazis. And even if he despises Nazis, he even let the person go after he surrendered. His charisma and personality also contributes how his betrayal works. The reason why Pavel betrayed Artyom is because he knows Corbett will launch an attack from D6, and Artyom's percentage of chance of surviving is near impossible. That's why when you're fighting him, he said that you could have been with us, and instead of being mad, the Dark One identifies him of being sadness that makes it people change their mind after you were betrayed by Pavel. While his actions are wrong, they're perfectly reasonable. Pavel wants Artyom to survive and be converted so they can be the true three musketeers or comrades. That's why when people understand the story deeply, they immediately forgive Pavel's actions and serve as the empathetic villain. There's also other factions that have their goals, while few people in that faction serve oppositely. While you see Nazis laughing and killing people due to their supremacy, you can see other Nazis that gets bullied and sadness. While the Russians and communists are known for their equal, there's also Russians that strive as the Nazis of domination and power. There's also a villain who's like this. General Moscon beats you, plays like a villain you expected, getting mad at his son after not listening to what he said, to reveal the plot twist where he's being manipulated by Corbett. After you listen to Moscovin's son, of Moscovin's brother getting killed because of Corbett's plans, to twist and take his rank, and Corbett talking to Moscovin on the meeting where he's being manipulated to let him do his own trick to poison people, or using tricks in his book. In fact, he's the only villain where you expected from other games, a heartless person who is power hungry and rule over the world by his power, by manipulating, twisting, and exploiting. That makes the Dark One also a participant, and Artyom's journey so important. Without the Dark One and Artyom, we wouldn't know the truth about the past of what Moscovin did, or what happened to Moscovin's brother, that he's like Artyom when he gives up, and is depressed forever when he makes that mistake of killing his brother that cannot be changed. that Artyom could have been Moscovin when he wasn't wake up by Khan to discover another baby Dark One child and try to forgive each other so quickly. That makes the ending so satisfying to play. While it's generic holding line type of gameplay, but with context of the story, from the villains that you despise, empathize, and factions you understand deeply, or saving people by bandits, to progress your goal, you won't think about that, but endlessly protecting D6 with flamethrowers, miniguns, shields, and trains. That makes this game a worthy finale to a beautiful journey. But there's two endings, where Artyom does the heroic death and the bad ending by exploding everyone off, while Anna is monologuing his husband's story with Hunter's token. But if you manage to forgive the Dark One, it will be Artyom who's saying his last words and explaining everything that happened in the event. And the characters in this game have a lot of personality, good voice acting, and charisma, well, for most of them. And Khan history is repeating himself. His story aspects are interesting, but when he's in gameplay, we keep following him, especially in his DLC. But what makes Khan as a character is how you started this all, and old characters like the blacksmith, while not having a lot of screen time, still has his moments of the railcar. Although there's one character that people despise, Anna. When understanding the character, she's only screen time is so little that it makes her concept useless, where first she insults you, not able to duo with her, instead we duo with Pavel, rescue her, bang, and the end. The narrative doesn't change that much if you remove her, and I don't mind the character if the character isn't horrible, but her writing is what makes it horrible. Some people might defend her character, but her redeeming factor is her concept and the unique idea from the writers. Since it's the first time to see a FPS game without RPG elements that has a romance, that's the only part where I agree, but the execution is missing, which is a shame. Then again, while everything I listed were positive and negative, that is my intention, because I want to be fair, although I still love this game to death. That made Last Light so authentic because of its characters and presentation, that makes the world so real, whether it's realism, over the top, immersing, or humorful. There's hours for unforgettable moments in this world, while making the game more of an action game rather than a tension survival horror game. It still makes up for it because of its atmosphere, from marketing, meeting a global audience, people doubting that the East can make AAA games. Last Light didn't end with a satisfactory result. It exceeded the expectations. After finishing the Metro Last Light campaign, the single player was really memorable, but I remember in the original version, there's a DLC version of 4 packs. Each of them costs $5. There's also a controversial DLC, which if you don't pre-order the game, you need to buy the Ranger Hardcore to experience that difficulty that is favorite of the Metro community that wants to have that challenge. I researched even more why they intended to do this, and Deep Silver community manager explained why. THQ was already planning to do the pre-order when they still have the publishing rights, and when Deep Silver took over the publishing rights, they said they cannot do anything because of the retailer needing a pre-order requirement. One thing that made them do this is probably they were stuck, since there were no content to make pre-orders possible. The decision was understandable, and painfully it is. When you're gonna cut levels or lock Metro classic weapons that were known for in 2033, it will have a huge backlash and be more money hungry in the eyes of the community. Deep Silver was in damage control mode, and I played the DLC before, and it was one of my shortest experience that reminded me of my Battlefield 1. So for the sake of the video's consistency, I decided to review them by pack. So basically each trailer that was first released. So the first pack is the faction pack. We have 3 DLCs, one is Heavy, Sniper, and Kshatriya, which is Stalker. The Heavy DLC is mostly a downgrade of the ending mission in Last Light. You basically shoot mindless enemies while having a railgun and a grenade launcher. And while they are cool to use, you don't have a lot of time to spend with the guns often, because this mission only takes 20 minutes on hardcore. There's a reason why I said it's a downgrade. You don't have the context of the story. Your only mission is to kill the Reds. In Last Night's ending, main story, the reason why you kill every enemy is because you understand the story. If Corbett managed to take over the D6, he can manage to take over the world. The stakes are high when you defend your last breath as an elite outnumbered Spartan versus the Reds. In the DLC, there's none of that. Instead, you just experience as a heavy trooper or as a Reich fighting the Reds. Next mission is the sniper team. It's actually alright. Well, it's nothing unique because it's just a stealth mission. It's still good because when you get spotted, you have to do the last checkpoint, which makes the stealth mission more of a like connecting the dots and fighting a shot where you won't get spotted. You even get some conversations about the Reich with the Red Spy, Artyom, and Halva's escape before from the prisoner camp. It's alright until the ending. While you're now invested, it just left you a black screen to go to another DLC mission. Now the last DLC mission for the faction pack is Stalker, and this might be the best DLC from the community, and I can see why. It's really different and more of an experiment. Its concept is simple, but the execution is quite unique, because we haven't got this kind of concept where there's a shop, like you buy a radioactive suit, or sequences where you think you're safe, but yeah. And 2 stalkers also that help you in few moments. Going to the surface also is much of a risk, especially when the stranger hardcore. There's no checkpoint. The only checkpoint is to sleep. It makes going out of the surface more of a risk, and going back, that you can carry only 5 objects, and give it to the person where you can get money, so you can buy things from the shop. Well, you don't need most of them, because you only need to go to the library where you need to find the book. And that's it, you just need to go back to sleep, then the mission ends. Also, the librarian is quite a surprise. Metro 2033 was really scary, so going back again was... Their behavior is the same, but this time you don't have good guns to kill one librarian. In fact, this place was in the Metro 2033 mission. The place still looks the same 1 year later, except what you and Miller did in 2033. So if you didn't play the Stalker mission, when you have the Last Light DLC, you're missing out. It's unique that 4A took time on making a crafted DLC, because the rest of the pack didn't carry on what Stalker mission did. Like the Tower Pack. The Tower Pack in my opinion was alright, but then again, there's some problems, like the first, second, and the fourth. The third and the fifth were my highlights, since you can purchase soldiers, juggernauts, and snipers. The snipers are only in the fourth area, and the fire team is only in the third, fourth, and the fifth. What makes the Tower Pack lose its potential is they could have taken inspiration from the horde genre, like firefight, zombies, and tons of horde modes, and make it their own style and universe. What made people so enraged with the Tower Pack is the first and second, because the only way you can buy is by buying ammo, while having the restriction of guns, and seeing its potential was a colossal failure. I really like the Tower Pack, since I did play it on Hardcore Spartan, and while some are quite frustrating, since the humans are savage, the Nosalis in the Librarian has variety with it, while holding out with your fire team is interesting. That, they could have used this feature more, since what made me play Modern Warfare 3 Survival is by sending Delta Squad or my Riot Shield team just to make a defense and has that variety. Also, the issue I think people had is there's no tutorial. The DLC doesn't tell you there's free ammo you get and free medkit, which probably made the player stuck in the levels. Then again, this mode is probably the least favorite for the community. Now the developers pack. This is actually interesting. There's the arena, firing range, and the museum. The arena is alright. You can summon 4 enemies each side and watch or fight against or with them. There's the camera you can watch, while there's the music option, and the firing range where there's a lot of challenges. Accuracy doesn't matter though. All you need is just to get all the points required before the time runs out. And the museum where you look at paintings, and if you want to see the models of the enemies or characters, you can look at them closely now. But there's also another mission that includes the developer pack. the spider layer. It's something where I actually enjoy, making it more of a horror game, while the half is more of a horror aspect. By the time you gear up, you literally want all action, especially with the flamethrower. The introduction where you use the light as your only option, burn the cobwebs, and needing to use the charger to open the lights is quite unique, but it's not utilized really well since it's quite short. But playing this on Rage Hardcore can be difficult if you're afraid of spiders. I think this might be your favorite or least favorite due to how scary it is, especially when Artyom meets its characters. The characters pack has 3 levels. Let's go to Khan first. At first, my thoughts were right about him. We keep following him, but this time, there's some cool sequences though, like the rats or the train section. The story is also interesting by the time you went to the station. We're talking to the ghost from the past that Khan wants to confront, and this time, we're controlling him on what he did in the past. Basically, he's being crazy, but his craziness makes the horrors true. Pavel is also alright, it's just like Facility or Revolution, with a mix of combat and stealth. There's some cool moments though, that can be hilarious, and also more of like a environmental storytelling on what the bandits do when Pavel is sneaking or fighting.
Hey, what's up, man? Blin, how could this? I was just testing you. The gun was not even loaded, I swear.
And the ending is mostly like you escape with the Russian spies by giving a Russian spy a bullet, or Pavel being drunk with the hallucination dancers and seeing his future. And the last one is Anna. Might be the shortest thing I ever did to my DLC, just like the character screen time. You're just mostly sniping the Watchers and the Dark Ones, but tries to rescue Artyom from the Nazis. But it was too late. The atmosphere was really great, but you mostly combine the stealth and combat, and then that's it. And it's really quite short. But understanding why she said this dialogue only.
I had you sighted when you were way out there. Almost shot you too.
So are the DLCs worth it? Well, if you have the Redux, the DLC and the Rager Hardcore is free, and it's worth to spend a bit of time seeing the DLC. There's some DLCs that I like, but there's some DLCs that I despise, so it depends on the preference, just like the Redux. The original of 2033 was really sluggish, but if you take those out of the game, you can see the atmosphere, and it fits to the theme. Now you don't have to worry about it, because 2033 has a Redux edition where people are mixed with it, and this may cause some controversy, but I love it, because it fixed almost every issue I have with 2033 and created new problems. It's basically Last Light with 2033 story, and rightfully it's not bad, because they fixed the level design, except following NPCs and the trolley combat. The game doesn't transition to another level, instead it continues, and the best part is voice acting in English is fixed for Artyom. No longer the bland character that has the poorest voice acting in the entire gaming industry, but a person that expresses those thoughts. The cutscenes have also changed for more point of view instead of a cinematic. I didn't mind the change though, because the original and the Redux does the job done. The gameplay is basically Last Light, which can be an issue, because I have complaints with Last Light's gameplay on how guards are clumsy, but 2033's Redux is worse here, because the level design is expansive. Being able to shoot an unsuppressed weapon without guards already spot you is stupid. They have more numbers, but their numbers are more dumb enemies that can get killed instantly. To give credit though, there's some traps in the areas, but it's nothing since the game is brighter than the original. The lighting in this game is a preference, but it's super bright. What makes 2033 special is its dark themes and its bleakness, with the low textures of the game, making a world unfair place that you overcome by enemies that are threatening enough. It's a horror game where monsters can scare you due to their unnatural art style. 2033 Redux monsters at least shared this to the original, but human encounters are a different story because of the level design, and its atmosphere is alright, but ruins some aspects in the original. For example, you can see these police guards using the night vision, and that's what makes their tech really advanced and really look like a city. But in the Redux, since the engine of Last Light is really bright, you can see the tunnels being bright, that makes the night vision guards weird. It's just the game is really inconsistent. But I don't hate the Redux because they fixed most of my criticism from 2033. by the level design of the suicide bombers, movement, and gameplay, but the immersion of the game is really dependent. Most of the time it looks good with the gorgeous lighting, but ruins the grimness of what the original had. But you can fix this problem by lowering the gamma down, and the level design adds some parts to the Redux, like a hidden cache, a place where you can drink, journals, and a firing range. These are some extras, but the art style of the monsters is meh. 2033's monsters look dark, and that fits to the game's design, and the Redux is opposite, so it depends if you like that change. And you can finally attach guns, instead of buying them individually. The last one that gives 2033 Redux an advantage is the optimization, and the options, where you can select difficulty with survival or Spartan playstyle, with last light's difficulty option. But what I like about the Redux is that new players can finally have a more forgiving adventure, instead of a harsh game where some parts may be unfair. It's a game where people can have an enjoyable time. While the atmosphere in some parts is ruined, I can forgive it because they almost fix every issue on the original. That proves that they still care about the Metro franchise, like their latest installment. Ukraine and Russia have been one of the biggest conflicts in human history that repeats itself in a different technology. Although I don't want to deep dive into histories or politics, but I want to talk about the effects on 4A with their finance and how it changed everything. 2014 was the start of the protests in Kiev. Everything was in violence due to massive protests. I recommend you to watch the documentary from Netflix or research if you're interested in this. Anyways, 4A's headquarters is from Kiev, which affected their financial purposes, while having to publish the Redux edition from Deep Silver. Well, the employees of 4A are safe, and if anything happens, they'll evacuate. It was clear. Dean Sharp, CEO of 4A, decided to move on our place, and Andrei Prov quotes, "This marks the start of the new chapter for 4A Games. We are proud of our achievement as a young studio, and humbled by the response to our output so far. The team is looking forward to this new adventure." And where does 4A move to become the new headquarters? Malta. Living in Malta is a bright sunny place that CEO of 4A, Dean Sharp, has a reason to move Malta, as 4A's headquarters quoting him, "By basing our new headquarters in Malta, a member state of the EU, 4A Games will be able to better compete on the international stage." Most of 4A at that time was moving to Malta, and it was more connected and different to their structure, but the company wanted something to change. While the Metro Cluster tunnels were a really great setting, because of Dimitri's writing, 4A wanted a different experience to deliver for the fans, a surface where you can finally explore to the Russian continent, which they had the experience in creating an environment for the surface in the past two games, but not really the scale of what you expect, and a few 4A members were GSC members who made Stalker, Shadow of Chernobyl, so making a Metro open world game is odd. Not because of that reason, but we're used to the linear structure from the tunnels or the surface. While 4A's past games allow you to explore into the surface, it wasn't that much due to them being linear, or most of the time, you stay in the underground tunnels, and making an interconnected world is only in the DLC from Kshatriya, but making an open world Metro would need a lot of difference, new environments, scale, few RPG elements, and variety of factions, and so much more. That reminds me of the 2033's design document, that in fact they looked past from their document. It really surprised me how they wanted to bring back the old documents that were scrapped, which is already evident from the 2033 and Last Light development section, so I don't need to repeat it here. What's odd about this is making a new game that is different from the linear shooter is alright, but it's probably weird that they made a VR game called Arctica, which was different but had the same idea of the Metro. I won't talk about Arctica because that's not the point, but they were making a VR game, which the Metro fans thought there won't be another sequel, but behind the scenes in 2016, they were making Exodus, where despite the challenges on creating Metro Exodus, the developers still have too many visions and passion from the franchise. Andrei Prov is around 50, but when he's talking or developing games, he sounds like a young member who loves developing games that can make terrains, forests, buildings, and monsters in each day. The new open world also creates a lot of freedom with the developers that all they need is to make it more Metro-y with the locations that can be a perfect blend of atmosphere and horror from the developers. And creating an open world game is simple, but 4A is really different because they say,
we're not trying to get a game as service for those new trends. We're still aiming for this is what you guys asked for, we're gonna deliver.
That in fact that they already created the environment and the team from Volga, Taiga, or Caspian has already the blueprint of the environment where all they needed is to make content, whether it's a broken building, a huge tower, or bonus level design that is for combat, or some reference. The skull guy was dead but had a familiar suit and a crowbar, where it's an inspiration from the legendary series. 4A wasn't treated as a corporation, but they were treated as a family, where people were lone Spartans, creating things that were unintended, but something that took weeks or months to show that it became a final product of the game. The weapons is a great example. The coin of Russia is a sight from the Tikhar. The artist just likes it. That it became the final product, where it's basically they're making a sandbox shooter that in development is also like a sandbox with the developers' tools that they created. Most open world games are reused and play in the same in a different environment. 4A on the other hand is different, where all they develop is by hand, and the testers find any bugs or hilarious glitch that can be fixed by the developers. If any game breaking or one small textures or misplaced object is bugged, and this was really something that is wholesome. It's like the developers are like the children would build something by themselves and show it to the family, and they had no choice but to smile for their efforts. On the novels on the other hand, Metro Last Light had a promotional for 3035, which was Dimitri's novel that was a prequel for Metro Exodus, for having backstory on the characters that are 8 or 10, and the adventures. It's also no surprise he will be writing the story of Exodus. Everything was clear on the lineup, except what they'll do in the Aurora. Outside of the Aurora, they finished and did everything inside of it. There was an issue though. The freedom was so much that their direction was unbalanced and shaky. A great example is Taiga. Taiga in the E3 was massive, but it was cut down to size to become the linear section in the final product. That the team had so many content that it ruins the schedule that the creative director Angie Prof had a stroke and was absent half of the game while being concerned with the publisher. This isn't common for 4A. Their past games had a lot of issues where they crunched their way to finish the game, that they weren't concerned with their health, instead they were concerned with their game. Also, the schedule of the release date was an issue. In 2017, Articus was finished and most of the 4A staff is helping the development, but the time of developing in 2018 was impossible and was fully delayed. While the game is finished, it just wasn't polished enough, as the developers expected so they decided to release the Metro Exodus on February 15, 2019, until Deep Silver created 4A's Nightmare. Remember when I talked about Deep Silver having a pre-order bonus for Ranger Hardcore and you need to pay for it? Well, there was no excuse. I can understand the reason, but Metro Exodus on the other hand is a 1-year time exclusive game where you can buy it on the Epic Game Store for $50, technically if you're not in the region lock. At first I didn't understand this until when the social frenzy outcry happened that I finally fully understood, where you're super excited to play the game that you love from Last Light and 2033. Exodus you have to wait for a year is just bullshit. Even if you're gonna download the launcher because of it, it's just scummy where it restricts you and does not have any benefits unless you're the publisher or you're lucky to have that $50 launch. While it sucks having gamers being angry and harassing the developers, it's just understanding where people are frustrated due to Deep Silver making a deal with Epic Games to have a 1-year time exclusive. But the difference is people were saying Deep Silver is ruining the Metro brand in the long term, where they might kill the Metro franchise. Funny thing is, I played Metro Exodus on Steam, it had positive reviews, people forget about this nightmare since it's the internet, and promise not to make this time exclusive bullshit happen again. It's just a media frenzy that harasses the developers, where the developers were unprepared to face the backlash that we're not in the position to be in. Open world games are usually simple to its concept. Some took the UB-Box formula, some created their own path, and Metro Exodus is the exception of both. It's not completely a Ubisoft open world, but as any open worlds, it took some concepts, and the curiosity lies within it, where instead of finding outposts, predictable quests, or areas, you're greeted with these question marks. And this is what makes Exodus unique. You do not know if it's gonna be a base, a camp, or civilians, and while there is a base where you need to kill bandits, it's just there for the bonus level designs. There's also no fast traveling, meaning you have to sprint the entire way to the objective, and they don't take that long. If your adventures isn't greeted by the monsters of the surface, that Volga is the best example of what an open world is, the immersion, where you're introduced to this abandoned village and greeted by the fanatics while you do the main missions. You also are curious on what buildings you want, and since you need materials, ammo, and supplies, you're always gonna find something useful, so you can upgrade weapons or refill medkits after you fought the monsters or humans. Even the boats also have consequences. I remember one riding a boat. I was jump scared by these shrimps and needing to kill them with my dirty weapon desperately, fighting them with tension, and boats don't respawn, so I have to find another boat or try to get back to the boat. While there's also another factors that could kill me. There's also areas like the lake house, stations, areas that you need to get your karma up, and the bat, where you need to get the teddy bear. These aren't set pieces, they're open world elements that is part of the world, while having areas of the whale, bridge, or the church for the main missions. What I love about Volga is its diversity, and it's introductionary when we're leaving to Moscow, and visiting the place where we don't need to use gas mask, except in specific areas, and it's a new experience for beginners and veterans alike. There is a lot of content in the side areas, where I traversed them a lot of times, whether it was normal, hardcore, or most recently, Hardcore Ranger. Those hours you spent in Volga are memorable due to them having areas that are new. I remember the anomalies where they were called demons that disappear. I remember the shores I went to Volga, only to get jump scared again by a catfish. That I was lucky didn't kill me, but when in the open world, I did get killed. And these were memorable due to them being alone, different, not into gunfires and explosions that distract you from its world. Its core is shooting, exploration, and different moments to the sequences you saw, which makes its core really new. Because of how many hours you spent in the entirety of the game, there's also aren't set or specific level you need because there's no leveling system, but each time you improve how to use your weapons and the mechanics of the game. I remember not using my map once and discovering the train where I found out there's bandits, and after I cleared them out and pulled this lever, I went back to the main mission, realizing I already killed them when I was exploring, making my mission easier. The game isn't specific enough to let you go there, you mostly discover it by yourself. There's also no artificial text when you kill all the bandits, you just loot their corpses so you can refill equipment that are in dire need. The reason why I do these side missions is because of the adventures and its pacing of the game. They don't take long to traverse since it's not difficult to find out. So when returning to the Aurora, finding the stuff I needed, Miller told me that I was going to another open world. That made me miss Volga immediately. Volga is a place that reminds me of a Battle Royale.
Why do you compare Metro Exodus to Battle Royales? That genre is dead.
Okay, shut the fuck up, let me explain. It reminds me of a Battle Royale because of that tension and that story you created just to share it with your friends, or moments that is unexpected but something that sticks in your mind forever. That is the best comparison I have, and while it may be controversial saying that word, I think it's the fair word to explain about Volga. It's such good pacing that every time I discover a new area, it's like a small adventure I travel, where it feels real due to not having artificial text, RPG systems, and no artificial leveling system where I have to use a specific gear. You just mostly find any equipment you get and fit it in your own playstyle. But after finishing and preparing for another adventure, its next stop is the desert of Caspian Sea. It's a different environment, but something that is new when looking at it that made me appreciate it at first. By its long stretch of its scale, enemies that are more competent, and the car, well, these are really great on paper. In execution, it's not. Not because of Caspian is bad, but it's much easier when traversing because you have the car that feels slow, and while the long range and CQC fights are much harder, they're the villagers from Volga, except more health. In Volga, their idioticness makes sense when fighting them, since they're not an organization, but more about religion. Caspian is an organization, but its decision making on NPCs are...
Come out with your hands above your head!
Metro NPCs are not smart, and their AI isn't always great. What made me play other open world games like Halo Infinite or Assassin's Creed Rogue or Black Flag is their gameplay loop, the dynamic fights where you're in that ship battles, feeling like a war, and the enemy AI that is much smarter and capable to take you down in a smarter way instead of tweaking the enemies to BS mode. Metro's AI has these, but they utilize it quite poorly, unlike other games that are known for their AI. The car also makes it easier since there's no shrimp or a mutant catfish that instantly kills you when you walk to the scripted place. There's also no issues when you ram into zombies, since they cannot overrun your vehicle. Instead, they die in the goofiest way possible that I got an achievement out of it, and Sandstorm is more of a gimmick instead of a threat. The anomaly is a threat since they can damage you at night, and it's dangerous if you get closer. But the sandstorm is rarely seen and it isn't scripted really well in the open world that has an opportunity to have a sandstorm. But I'm not saying Caspian is bad, because there's some parts that is enjoyable, killing enemies in CQC or far away, or going to the bunker with the spiders was memorable. I'm just saying Volca is better since it's the first time and the execution was far better since it's the introduction when you're alone with that mystery and adventure. And Caspian also shares that, while having fights to be more often, instead of going adventures in the mysterious with that beautiful environment and the core. Some people think Caspian is the best open world and I respect it. There's some places that I didn't even know existed, and they're secrets. I just think Caspian is my least favorite since the combat of any Metro games isn't about shooting, since Artyom has been nerfed by its movement in a positive way, although there's some issues to it. Metro Last Light movement was perfect since it has been faster, and jumping is what you expect from an average human. Exodus is different since it's much more weighty, reminds me of 2033, that you're always an underdog who has troubles weighting a gun, slow to ADS, slow to move. These are good changes that makes Metro authentic, but jumping is odd because it's like you're floating in space when you jump, and this also affects when you're falling down since it heavily damages you for some reason, which can be annoying to use on our medkit. Other than that, Caspian could have been my favorite if the combat of the humans were better, but I would pick this over the zombies. I'll talk about that one later. And what about Taiga? Well, it's one of my favorite open worlds. Technically it's linear, but I would say it's a mix of all metros. The areas where you require the ghost levels, like in 2033, the combat pacing of fighting, like Metro Last Light, and the exploration of buildings, finding loot, like Exodus. It's 3 games in one package. That's why I enjoyed Taiga. You even lost the backpack at first, requiring you to use the crossbow and go on your way into the forest, even sometimes requiring to be stealthy in the atmospheric forest by wolves. Taiga is refreshing after playing Volga and Caspian since it's much more different. In fact, every open world you went, whether it's Caspian, Volga, and Taiga, it's much different in a positive way. They don't play the same in a different region. It forces you to change in a different playstyle, while having that immersion factor that is known for. Comparing the open worlds isn't fair, but making them combine each other in one package is. That can make any Metro fans enjoy it. Metro Last Light has its own 2 playstyles, but now it forces you to play both playstyles at the same time, and that's what I love about Exodus. It's the combination and variety that makes it fun, fresh, and enjoyable from the open worlds. What about the linear missions then? Metro Last Light and 2033 is linear, so you would think Exodus shares the same quality on these 2 games, or improves them better. And Metro is not about tunnels or the surface, but there's magic behind it, like Khan's mysteries, horrors, and monsters that are a lot. Even the Dark One sequences from 2033. It's clearly not just your average shooter that is simple, but more into the sequences around it. So what I think about Exodus was alright, but it feels like a downgrade from its predecessors. But I'm not saying they're bad. The Dead City, Taiga, and Yamato is one of the fresh airs after we went to open world locations. What I'm saying is the sequences. Volga linear missions are just 2 enemy types, humans and zombies, while not using other enemy types from the open world. Fighting the humans are alright, since they're better than these fucking zombies, because the zombies are just fucking annoying. Their only way to attack is by fucking throwing bricks, and it's bullet sponginess. In fact, their variation from color red to purple is just more health, so shooting them makes it more frustrating and wastes your ammo. Caspian also shares the same problem in the linear sections, since they become super repetitive that it's not fun to fight, but more like a stone wall that blocks your progress. I would also include the spiders, but they're only in the small section in the bunker, and humans, while act the same, they're dynamic enough to show their presence. The zombies are not, and is one of the worst enemies in Exodus. Thank God they got their own medicine. What happened to Metro monsters? Have they gone out due to them being extinct? Well, most of them are in the open world, and Osalis and Librarians took their place in the Dead City, while Taiga is spiders, wolves, shrimps, and humans, including the bear. I'll talk about the bear later. Yamantau are just enemies that always rush B, but the Watchers have a missed opportunity, since their only present is Moscow, which is only just 5 minutes in the linear missions. So meaning half of the time you spent is just killing zombies and humans, which is tedious, and I would be alright if the zombies exist, but they just took a lot of the quotas from the linear missions, not giving the variety of Metro monsters a chance. And while I like Yamantau, it's just shooting enemies room by room, making the fight less immersive. Well, they can ride elevators, but that's it. Although Ranger Hardcore is one of the best experiences in Yamantau, since its balancing is fair. Taiga enemies are alright, but the bear is just questionable. Metro Last Light had a bear fight, serving it as a boss battle, and you would think Exodus would do it better, but that's not the case. Your only way to kill the bear is by mag dumping, and his only attack is charging you, while you don't have the ability to dodge unless you run away. That's the entirety of the gameplay loop, making it boring. Last Light is better since the Dark One and you cooperate together to destroy the bear by finding its weakness, making them feel real since they're both on the same page. And I don't mind the zombies or any enemies in the open world, since they always keep your resources in check, but in linear missions, if your enemy type is repetitive, unfun, or confusing, it makes the fight difficult and tedious in an unnecessary way. Human encounters are the only exception I only have, because the things I said earlier, but one part that is confusing to me is surrendering enemies. It doesn't do anything about the karma system, except makes the player have an easy time, although there can be a moral standpoint for the players if they treat this like a shooter or they feel bad and ignore them. But overall, what I'm saying is it's funny how the open world are much more believable, because on how much 4A focuses on making an immersive atmosphere and has a lot of variety that the linear missions doesn't have. Although there's one place that made me enjoy its slow-paced immersion, which is the Dead City. 2033 and Last Light has the Dead City, but they're not that long and important to the story, since it's just another transit that you need to go. But the Dead City, in its story and immersion, is wonderful, because the things and the feeling like you're exploring into this high radiation. When you follow Miller, it's just a snowy place that is radiated, but the more you deep dive into the Dead City, you can see what's going on. A lot of dead people in the metros. The water has been infested by an unknown infection. Artyom is suffering in a slow death while finding the goal he needed, and seeing the flashbacks on what happened to the city. The city isn't nuke like in the Moscow, but it became radiated, so any people that breathes in it will suffer forever in this deep, snowy land, with few enemies as possible. The slow pace works because the more you focus on the environment, the more you feel about what's going on below you. This is why I don't talk about Moscow, since the Dead City is way better in every way. Exodus is one of the longest Metro games I have ever played, while having the 2033 movement, the gorgeous open world, and while its Volga and Caspian linear mission is a downgrade, other linear missions make up some of the losses, since their open worlds is much more immersive than the linear missions, and sound effects has been improved, and has a lot to offer with the attachments that makes your playstyle different, discovering new items, and the scenarios you created in the open world by the weapons you bring. Its only issue is just the jumping of Artyom, the repetitiveness of the enemies, and the downgrade of a quality linear Metro game. But the Dead City heavily improved on the linear missions, and I identify why people like the Metro so much. It's not the shooting, enemies that you fight, or chasing trends, and that's not what Metro is known for. But what people know Metro is it makes you a person that immerses you, that makes it real. And that is why I love Metro's grounded atmosphere. It's the talented developers that respects the author on creating an atmosphere with engaging exploration, and that author also respects the writers in the story. Metro stories that time were really interesting because of what I said about their stories in the previous section on this video, so going to Exodus with high expectations, while rolling my eyes at the same time, and there's a reason for it, because 2033 and Last Light were Nazis and communists. Now in Exodus, the authors wanted to expand the universe by letting us going out of the metro, so now it's cultists, adults that acts like a children, Caspian conquering the desert, and crazy people eats people? I was confused here at first, but that's because I'm so used to Nazis and communists in the past two games that I thought it would be a follow-up. But aside from that, there's one place that I didn't even mention in the gameplay section, which is the train. The train is literally my favorite section for a lot of reasons, where you are there for quiet times, from the high intense actions, your crew reflection after surviving in the adventures they went, conversating with people that you want to know more about them, reading journals for the description, with the enemy types, characters, or weapons, and seeing the development to these characters, whether it's an individual talk, romantic talk, or the Spartans. Your crew will change dialogue if, for example, Duke dies or survives, and literally has a wedding section after seeing Stefan and Katya's relationship from Volga, Caspian, and the train. And even for veterans, you can play the Metro 2033 soundtrack from the guitar if you listen to the conversations from that long. I literally love it. It was one of the best things I spent in Exodus, although you can skip this by going to another mission, which is great for people who care about playing the game, which I don't recommend, because there's a lot of crucial moments that you need where it requires context, like in Yamato, when Miller can finally contact the Ministry of Justice. I'll talk about that key plot later, but the train, well, it's one of my best highlights for me. There's one fatal flaw. Artyom, the main character that I love due to his movement and point of views, and hate that due to his silence. Artyom is one of those relatable characters that have no personality because they put the character in the wrong role, not just once, but in 3 games. He's not a player's vessel. It even became so obvious that they have to make some kind of excuse to why he cannot speak. In Halo Combat Evolved, the reason why Chief is stoic and conveys no emotion is because you are in his shoes. The player's understanding on what's going on is the same as Master Chief, and most of his lines are what you expect if you play as him.
Punch it.
This is also intentionally evident by Marty's interview.
Master Chief should always know everything you know, and everything Master Chief knows is everything you know. Like, he should never have more knowledge than you.
Okay.
And you should never have more knowledge than him. Which makes it really hard to tell sort of a classic story with dramatic irony.
Artyom, on the other hand, isn't like that. He's a human that is married, which in conversations, he doesn't even say anything when it needs to be because it's like the wall meme that you're talking to. And in this important moment, where Anna is getting sick, and you, as a husband, don't even respond, which is so questionable and flat, that only actions with no words is impossible, and doesn't justify why he cannot speak, that easily distracts the player instead of focusing on the plot. It makes sense for him to be a silent character in the open world because there will be no filler and won't be annoying, but in storytelling, if you're written as a relatable character, which is mostly you speak, you need to have some kind of words to put out. In fact, I would have been surprised if Artyom reacts to Anna's sickness by saying something, not moving my hands, because it would break the character in the positive change and be more impactful. Well, he does mention it, not in game, but loading times with the journal.
But right now I'm begging all gods, please, watch over Anna, and make the valley cure her of her affliction.
I don't have an issue if Artyom is alone exploring and wandering by himself, where movement conveys it. That works, but it's not. You met a lot of Spartans that are so well written, only to be wasted by pauses that you think it's a glitch. I don't hate Artyom as a character. What I hate about Artyom is this one minor issue that could have been easily fixed in Last Light because they already have a voice actor that is great and is written perfectly by the journals. Most people love main characters because of how they talk, how they express themselves, that it makes perfectly sense why. But if your character doesn't even talk in crucial moments, except in loading screens, how they can be invested in the protagonist? He's even one of the reasons why the story exists, where he is introduced to this broken city, but he desires in his dream, wanting to go out from the cluster metros, thinking that other cities still exist instead of Moscow only, but always risk his life a lot of times, where Miller tells Artyom to stop being so obsessed with his dream, where not only Artyom is the second in command, but he has a wife now, where he has grown, experienced, and a hope for the people. That when the Spartans saw Artyom, they interact so charismatically and personality, where instead of Artyom being isolated in 2033, exploring alone, he is now exploring with his crew and his wife. Anna was one of the characters that I hated due to her writing, and doesn't have a reason to be in the story. Now in Exodus, she has been so well written that the community might even call her a waifu. That even if Artyom doesn't speak, his reactions when moving, listening to her personality, and interactions that are so cute. Her development with his father and his husband makes the character bond better, and is written better, and it makes sense, because when Artyom is listening to Anna, she is giving a lot of backstories or her thoughts about the journey we went on, and why she is now convinced about why Artyom wants to go out and stays with him in the end. But as I said before, this could have done better if Artyom speaks, which if they want to make the character consistent, it is not an excuse, because there are games and sequels where your protagonist changes for the better, since he or she is evolved and experienced, that makes it such a missed opportunity, like the introduction. Every story always needs an introduction, where the writers need to show what the protagonist is capable of, something that he or she needs, with engaging and investing the journey, which all the pieces are here, but how they explain it is unrealistic. Artyom is going down to the tunnels, where he just gets injured, is patched up after the third time, and goes back to the surface for the fourth time with Anna. And this second mission is the start of unrealisticness, not because of the weeks later, but when you're in that train section, you're captured by the Hansa, and there's a lot of questions that I have. Why do Anna think these are allies? Does Hansa knows that we're with Miller? Why do we ride into a middle of nowhere, only to get killed? These are questions that are so unexpected, while Artyom is the one who started it. Getting captured changes everything. If Artyom and Anna would not have been captured, Artyom would still go to the surface, risking his life, and the train makes it a purpose to continue Artyom's dream. That is unexpected, in fact the whole crew. The build-up is so slow that instead of intrigue, it's more of frustration, but its storytelling doesn't have that much meaning or doesn't have enough context to make you interested. You just get captured and escape with the train to start the adventure, and this isn't 20 minutes or 30, but an hour, where everything by its story, gameplay, and cutscenes doesn't change much, but what's around it is. That is the reason why I didn't explain Moscow so much, because how much they put them all without thinking and putting any thoughts. Volga is the one that improved its storytelling, but not at first. Instead of Nazis versus communists, it's just bandit versus catfish anti-electric cult, which was unexpected and launched, but even if I felt that it was much weaker, I came with an open mind and was invested in this world that I stumbled, and it paid off, where Exodus uses its environment not by making it beautiful, but making an environmental storytelling. I remember one witnessing a tarfish, where it's not friendly or an enemy, just a neutral animal, although it can be fed. So when the cult has this charismatic leader that tries to use words that encourage the cultists, swear the oath to the starfish, and make electricity is a sin, and gods, in quotation, will protect you, where if you explore the open world, the anomaly is attacking the villagers, and yet they survive, making them think the god of the fish exists, and witnessing the father remembering the past where he uses electricity while his son is brainwashed by the cult leader, that it made him argue with his dad. It makes sense because Volga cult is a religion where the leaders spread lies and us humans eat those lies to make sense in the wrong way. Even the linear missions make the environmental storytelling work. I remember when I headed this bunker and factory, it was full of chemicals in the water, something that makes sense because it causes shrimps, zombies, and the starfish exist, that made everything feels like a side story in this world, where the Russian military is storing these chemicals and technology that has been put in the water, where the cult is worshipping this fish just to make the electricity is a sin and the fish a god. Which is sad because they're worshipping something that is caused by technology. There's even broken house that I stumbled upon, those weird skeleton and noises in the background, seeing ghosts, and the more you stay here, the Geiger gets crazier. Although this isn't just a side story where you knew it immediately, I wrote this section because of how much I understand the world, and the more you replay this game, the more you'll understand its open world stories. That maybe write an entire paragraph about the anti-electrical fish cult. Maybe one day there's this passionate YouTuber making a lore about each Exodus open worlds and sharing the stories about it, and these are just side plots that are complex and yet has an emotional payoff in the end. But the main plot, on the other hand, while there's a lot of hours, charismatic characters, and an engaging story, it isn't quite that emotional payoff. You went somewhere you don't know, train gets broken, you find someone, a family, and gets carriage, and then go on our journey. So while Volga's side stories are quite emotional, and the more you explore, the more you understand, which is something that is worth if you love the Metro's universe. Its main plot is like that in a nutshell. You go to a place that you don't know and need to collect something, one item, that can further that journey. But that's also alright. I like stories that is quite short and yet plentiful to make people invest in the universe while focusing on the main plot. But the main plot is a 20-hour linear narrative that is built up by building a home for your crew, while the places you stumble do change through its levels and sequences. That makes a lot of things happen. But what about the plots? Is it quite interesting or better than Last Light? Well, not really. The only pressure part about Exodus is just Anna's sickness, and feeling your goal is closer, but in the end there's another level you need to reach, just like chasing a wild goose and getting captured or knocked out. There's a reason why villains exist. It makes the protagonist pressured and keep their eyes peeled. But that's not Exodus. The villains you went are just a glimpse into this world that you fight or convince them, or just... But if Artyom's goal doesn't have a lot of pressure and just only have two goals, which is to find a home and make Anna better, what's the tension for the player? It makes me appreciate Last Light's storytelling more because of how much tension does the player have while keeping the world building interesting, the same as Exodus, where the plot threads is your mom, the antagonist's betrayal, villains that you can relate to, a war in 2D6, and a child that you personally destroyed their species but helped them in the end, which is so much better than only have two goals. Although Anna's sickness makes the player tension because of how memorable and likable she is, but she still survives in the end. Artyom? Well, we died once, and it's gonna repeat that through the Dead. The Dead City is the final chapter where I enjoyed its storytelling, not because it feels, but the story. If you played Last Light and 2033, you must know the Dark Ones, since they're the main plot in the game. While Exodus has the Dark Ones absent, it makes sense since radiation is the breathable air for the Dark Ones, and it's the most radiated city from the entire continent of Russia, and going there was a suicide, but you overcome it, probably. But how did Artyom reach his goal when the Dead City is massive? Well, it's the Dark Ones, and it makes sense for them to exist, since Artyom helped the Dark Ones before in Last Light, which you can feel that they exist, and it's one of the reasons why Artyom and Anna are still alive, where the Dark Ones are the ones who make Artyom follow through the hallucinations of his wife, and Miller does not even know how he found Artyom. This is where Artyom is heavily at risk, suffering slowly but persevering to follow through the hallucinations to get the medicines that he needs, that made him succeed in his goal, not because he's strong or can do it alone, but it's where he helped before, returning the favor to him. This is where I got attached to Artyom, because his movement is so perfect on what he felt, while being isolated at the same time, the struggles, overcoming, and surviving, in the end, if he didn't kill innocent people. Which is fair enough. I don't mind the karma system in Last Light and 2033, but getting them is complex, and I do not know how many you need to get a good ending, but Exodus is quite an improvement here. Not only you need to get the karma system, but what you did makes the character died, stay, injured, or alive. And getting the karma system is much easier since you can do the side missions, knocking out the surrenders, and killing people which tries to kill you. The train levels also do the major parts of reflecting your action, whether you see the interactions like Demir appreciating helping his people, Aloysia helping Olga, or Duke being the show-off person that he is. And the train levels have a lot of dialogues to chat and listening to people, which is quite something that I like. Exodus is a game that reminds me that storytelling is simple, but the characters, writing, and dialogue are so good that it makes you appreciate their journey in the end. Even though there are flaws, bugs, plot holes, and storytelling became a letdown, the train is literally a highlight for me. Not only because of conversations, but it's meditation after you spend so many hours going to the places that you went, from fighting, exploring, and discovering. As I said before, it is entirely optional. You can skip everything to continue the game, and I remember doing that once, but it didn't make me connect with the characters correctly on my first playthrough, and there's themes, plots, and development we see for the character's growth, which I missed out. Even Yamato, while it's killing people room to room, its storytelling to that is a surprise. While it looks like D6, it really is D6, where it became like this if the Spartans haven't got this facility. But Yamato isn't about the story, but it's about Miller as a character. Before past games, he cares more into the military and the government, but after in Exodus, he was tricked again and again. He finally cares more about the family that he led, and this is evident when you are in the Dead City, where Miller blames himself while Artyom is the opposite. Miller is like Artyom when he was young, where he's naive and stubborn, that he risked his life. That's why when Miller found him, he sacrificed himself to save Artyom while calling him son, that Artyom's survival will not be in vain and will watch Anna. The part where Anna gets sick is because of Miller, where he tells everyone needs to scout, and while he's flawed, he's redeemable through his actions and learns his flaws. And Metro's Exodus flaws will take those feedback in the DLC. Metro's Last Light DLC, as I said before, is a mixed bag, because while the content has a lot of variety, some are short that feels the same, or questionable on why they add this, and others change the style on how you proceed, and have decent hours to call this a worthwhile spend. So going to Exodus, I was having a bit of high expectations because their main game was great. While a bit of mistakes happened, the DLCs are there to address Last Light's DLCs, while their content is longer than I expected. The 2 kernels is 2 hours, and Sam's story is around 6 or 8 hours, like the original Metro games. But how do the DLCs hold up? Well, the 2 kernels is the first piece of DLC, where we see the past from Colonel Klepnikov, and the present from Colonel Miller himself. This is the continuation of the Dead City, by seeing its backstory about the mysteries of the dead people we found in the tunnels, and in this first mission, they already addressed some flaws that I previously said. A voice protagonist.
You'd make a good gondolier.
I can sing too.
Please, spare me. Your singing is an atrocity.
It's not surprising because in the characters pack, they have a voice protagonist, although they are quite short, that they don't have enough time to be fleshed out. Klepnikov doesn't have this problem, because how they are utilized is what a real-life human should be.
He still doesn't understand many things and idealizes us. Thinks we are knights without fear and beyond reproach, but real life is complicated.
And the first mission, I already am immersed in the setting, because Klepnikov only replies when he needs to, something that is possible since we can understand how he talks, moves, and is able to understand what is going on, instead of being silent and being told what to do. We also see how we do our jobs, by burning the worms with the flamethrower, venturing with the Oscom soldiers, understanding what is the system in the metro, and seeing how people are civilized. It brings back what is lost from Exodus about that civilization aspect from the other Metro games that you went to, and is perfectly addressed here. What also makes Klepnikov such a great character is how he talks about the situation that he is in with the general, while having the banter about his son, which is such a simple but effective change in a good way that it makes the discussion interesting, because you can hear their thoughts in a two-sided conversation that makes walking to the cramped places better, because people that you personally know will say something and you reply back. This also helps because Klepnikov has a son that makes it feel more personal. And question his job as a colonel. We're celebrating the new year, arguing about what his son witnessed, which leads into a war that is devastating because of no more green stuff, making the chance of the survival in the radiation small. Where this storytelling may be sad because there is a lot of examples that can lead to this, like electricity. In our generation, we use electricity by lights, driving, and etc. But if our world can't have electricity, we can handle it only in a few days. But if it's around a month, people will riot and cause chaos in this world. It is a tragic story that I can relate to, and it works because of its maturity, especially because the narrative isn't about the character's strong and smartness, but he and Miller felt the same victim about the lies of what we are told, which admits to his fault in front of his son, leading to his death, but also gives another life to Miller's family and his son, because of what he found that carries his legacy. Even if it's 2 hours, I recommend people to at least do it like a movie theater because of its gameplay having that perfect balance of quiet times, gunfire, and sequences that is structured really well by its pacing. The feeling of it also works by its transition, making all one shot that isn't cut out and makes the two corners more personal where there's no damn loading screens and makes the flow perfect. Although I don't make this DLC as a crowning achievement for 4A because their music is off. Reusing music is something that is tiring and makes it less memorable if you keep reusing it, especially when it's looped at the same beat. Don't get me wrong, Alexei is a great composer. His metro sounds are like a jack of all trades by its guitars, pianos, ambient horrors, calmness, and tension. But his music can get really stale if they keep reusing it. Which also damages some sequences of the music that don't have emotion to reinforce the presentation. But even if the music has problems, I still want you all to try if you have the DLC, because making a 2-hour DLC that is memorable is so enjoyable than having a 40-hour of content that is filled with quantity. And if you like the main game but want something a bit different, Sam's Story got you covered. Featuring levels that are in a new region that is already what Exodus fans are used to, while having Sam's Stories this time playing as an American bodyguard of Miller, which is Sam. This is one of those DLCs, while they play the same, I enjoy the most because of the flooded cities, broken buildings, factories, while there are new instruments to play like pianos and harmonica, the additional new weapons like the American M1911, and the flexible gun that is called Sammy. This gun alone can be a sniper, DMR, or a rifle, which adds to the flexibility because Sam's Story's guns are more powerful, while they add variety to your playstyle at the start. Some are also not even present to the main game, driving the boat that is much faster, and the biggest change is landmines that can make monsters of the surface train go boom.
Shit, that was close.
These also help if you desperately need resources. There's also sequences in the open world that you'll get off guard, and the zombies where we finally give them the torture. But as much as I enjoy Sam's stories of hilarious border fights, which I can understand a lot, there are some sequences that I hate, and especially when they made another blunder, which is the bat. The bear fight is just mag dumping it until the script is triggered, but the bat takes the cake on the worst bosses I have encountered in gaming. Fighting them at first was alright, since it's something that is unexpected, while the horde of bats is attacking you, and I'm alright if this is the first boss battle, but it isn't. The second sequence is much worse since you're pitted to this cramped area to fight, and you cannot dodge except using medkits to survive. Well, these are the only watchers in Sam's story. And the last part is the unnecessary part. You're exploring around this forest, only an asshole bat came back because you offended his mom, and then you came back to the same spot like it's all nothing, while stabbing his face when you defeat him. I have never seen a boss this worthless in my life, especially when it's not even in the narrative or a fun boss. And there is annoyance of zombies that could have been a solution on what I mentioned before, and pickups that are questionable.
Aha, I could use this.
You've been picking up a lot of things in the main game, and Sam's story is the blueprint of that main game, so I still don't know why to this day they included this. When you've been picking up so many things in the main game, it's not informative, useful, or anything to do with his personality. The finale is also the frustrating in the intro. You have this cool cutscene about the betrayal of this Russian second in command, and if you die, you repeat the same cutscene over and over again. I played this on Rager Hardcore, so it was impossible for me to quick save, that to the point I had to be so careful. What about the story then? The True Kernels was a short story but had the impactful message on the people we live with. Sam's story, on the other hand, is deciding that you can go home, but there will be a risk on Tom able to send the nukes to his target, even if that isn't his intention. And you can able to blow the submarine, but you still stay in the Russians region. That it makes your adventure pointless. In the game, I feel like it's an American parody to a Russian setting, that you beat a lot of people up, and later they forgive you. Even to the point of highlights that I still remember in the side content, but it's just a simple story of Sam's adventure to the new region, while finding his dad in America. While there are some parts I heavily hated in Sam's story, don't feel discouraged to play this, because it's something that is heavily worth the price. The game almost looks like a full price game, and it had a lot of strength in the main game, while repeating the flaws to the main game. Surprisingly, I enjoyed the True Kernels more than Sam's story, because the True Kernels feel refreshing after we're in the open world, and Sam's stories has more flexibility in the parts that are new, but more of the same in the base game. No, it doesn't mean that Sam's story is bad. In fact, they're both good and are different, but I'll say this though, I enjoyed Exodus DLC that are a bit longer and are something to worth replay, that are better than Last Light, because there are some parts that are filler on why it is a DLC, especially when you're excited about what is gonna happen until you are in the loading screen and the main menu. It's quite underwhelming to say the least. So if you finished the main game but did not finish these downloadable content, I urge you to try them, or you're just missing out in the end. This franchise alone is a reflection of my video. Writing the script was difficult, making them and editing was the hardest part, and it took me 6 months to finish this. But this conclusion is really what this game is. Metro 2033 is led by inexperienced developers, that it causes issues, bugs, and gameplay, which affects me a lot because of my microphone being awful after watching my video, that I had to recreate it with a better one, like Metro 2033 Redux. Metro Last Light suffers development due to transitioning things and lack of resources, but still improves on Metro 2033 because of the commitment, kinda like my Last Light, because of my limitations, and transition to a new microphone, and having to improve what my mistakes are. Although there's 3 parts to where I messed up and I tried to keep it subtle at best, and Exodus is the longest game and has a lot of things to say, which led a lot of time due to the war, mismanagement, and a lot of time is needed, which led this video to be almost an hour, that it could have been 2 hours if I talk about its enhancements, Caspian, and Taiga stories about the world. But with all the troubling things I had, it really made me think about the game because it really suffered the same thing that can be described in one word: exhaustion. But I hope any developers and I will be proud on what we did because of our passion and persistence. It makes the product we make achievable and for the better. I hope the next product from 4A will be polished and will translate those that succeed in their current development. And I hope you all enjoyed what I made, because it is such a roller coaster of emotions, thoughts, and passions that I will remember fondly. So what a ride I have been. I hope you all enjoyed it, and if you guys are still watching it, thank you. As much as I said that word a bunch of times in my video, I still am thank you because you guys make my job much satisfying, and my mental drain worth it. I have never made long videos in my life, and I hope I do this a bit rarely since it kinda gets frustrating that I can finally relate to people who makes long form content.
Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to The Right Opinion, the home of a twat with too much free time.
And what is missing? Oh yeah, questions. Gabe asked, what are your plans for the future? Not much, just create what I want and be able to enjoy the videos per time. I created while I still can. I'm quite young, so I just took YouTube as my hobby, not my main still. Rusik asked, or Rusik, or Rusi, whatever. Rusik asks, how long have you been working on your project? Around 5 to 6 months. I check again and I'm surprised I can do this in 3 months if I'm not distracted by playing, watching,
can kill, and look at the guns. 4 AWPs. Fnatic, they're ready to shoot some ducks as they cross the middle. It's going to be a challenge, and Apex, not in this lifetime. He is destroyed.
and personal life.